What is going on, guys? It's your boy Dylan and welcome back to another exotic weapon tier list video. Now in this video I'm going to be putting all of the exotic hand cannons into a tier list. I'm going to be giving them a rating for both PvE and PvP. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. The first weapon on the list is definitely going to have to be the Last Word. This thing is notoriously known within Destiny as a workhorse within the Crucible. Not so much in PvE. This thing has been under so many buffs and nerfs and changes throughout the years of Destiny, and I feel like Bungie have finally got it in the sweet spot that they think is okay. Now for me, a couple of advantages of using this weapon would be that it is full auto and it has incredible hip firing accuracy. Now the rating that I'm going to give this weapon for PvE is actually going to be a C. Now I would give it a C minus, but the reason I'm giving it a C again is just because of the full auto edge that it does have. You can get a very good burst damage on enemies, but for me, for PvP, it's going to actually get an A minus. Now the reason I would actually give it an A plus, but with the recent changes to how special ammo works, with a lot of people like to pair the Last Word with a sniper rifle, and it works very well when paired with one. Now obviously, if you don't know, when you die in Crucible you lose your special ammo, so you kind of have to use your primary weapon a lot more often, and I feel like the Last Word is a very ineffective weapon across all ranges in the Crucible, so your performance is very hindered when it comes to using this weapon. The next weapon on the list is going to be the First Curse. This is the Last Word's cousin. The slower rate of fire, the weapon that nobody really seems to give a shot. But for me, this thing is a very solid hand cannon as far as things go. It's got a very nice balance of a rate of fire and stability. The range on this thing is also pretty decent as well. It does pack one hell of a punch. Now for PvE, I'm going to actually be giving this thing a C+, mainly for it adding rounds back to the magazine. I found myself not having to go out my way to find primary ammo as much because it actually adds the ammo back. And for PvP, I'm actually going to give it a B-, which might surprise some people, but I do definitely recommend, if you can actually try and get your hands on this weapon, give it a go in Crucible. It's a hell of a lot of fun, and I actually don't mind using this weapon. Next on the list we have the Hawkmoon. Now this is a fan favourite weapon. This is definitely one of the more popular hand cannons within Destiny. This thing has 3 luck in the chamber bullets, makes it an absolute workhorse for DPS in PvE, and both the Crucible, landing those lucky shots can make you win gunfights in certain situations. Now for me, this weapon, I'm going to give it a B+ in PvE, mainly just for the fact that it has those luck in the chamber bullets, and it's just a nice weapon overall. Very easy to control, a nice recoil pattern, and overall just a solid weapon. And for Crucible, I'm going to be giving it a B+ as well. Like I said, for those luck in the chamber bullets, just gives it that competitive edge when playing in Crucible. Also has a slightly higher base magazine size of 13 that other hand cannons slightly lacking on that front. The next weapon on the list is going to be the Thorn. This thing was notoriously known from year 1 Crucible in Destiny. This thing was the go-to weapon throughout the entire first year of Crucible. This thing was an absolute workhorse. Now it has been nerfed down a hell of a lot from what it used to be. The burn damage isn't quite as effective as it once was in its previous days. But for me, this weapon still gets a solid C+ within PvE and PvP. Now, the reason it's not any higher than that, again, for me, it has a lower magazine size of 9. The burn damage, again, has been reduced so much down to the point where it's completely irrelevant. Plus, if you stack one of the artifacts on in the PvP as well, where you take reduced burn damage, I think it deals 1 burn damage for per tick, which is just completely irrelevant. Also, the recoil pattern, it does have quite a bit of a recoil and kick to it now from what it once was. But still, it's a nice weapon. But for me, it's mainly just a nostalgia point in Destiny for me. The next hand cannon on the list is the Ace of Spades. This is the Hunter exclusive exotic that you get from getting, I think it's rank 5 with the Gunsmith. He will in return give you a quest to get this weapon. This thing was known as the Poor Man's Fairbringer upon release. It has Firefly, which again the Fairbringer has. All round, it's a very solid workhorse in PvE. Nothing really bad to say with the weapon. Third Eye, kind of a little bit more useless in PvE, but for PvP it definitely gives it an extra benefit. Again, Firefly doesn't really need any explanation. It's by far one of the best perks for PvE. For me, I'm going to give this a A rating for PvE, and for PvP a B+, because for me, I've actually given this thing a go, and it's actually one of my more favourite exotics to use in the Crucible as far as exotic handcannons go. It's very effective, definitely recommend giving it a go. I actually go for a bit more stability on the weapon. I know a lot of people prefer the range with the reinforced barrel, but I prefer if you can stack the stability on this thing, it is definitely more viable in the Crucible. The next handcannon is going to be the Zal's Bane. Hopefully I pronounced that correctly. Now for me, this weapon is a love or hate. Now for me personally, I still hate this weapon. I cannot get to like it. The recoil pattern on this weapon is all over the place. It has a tremendous amount of kick to it. The reload speed is super slow as well, even with the increased reload speed for handcannons. So for me, just not a particularly great weapon whatsoever. Don't get me wrong, it does have a void burn on it, so it can become, quite a bit more of a beast in void burn activities for like nightfalls or heroic strikes. But for me, just not a great weapon. So for the ratings, I'm actually going to be giving this a C for PvE and a C- for PvP. Because for me, it's just a lackluster handcannon. It doesn't really have any great perks to it whatsoever. The next handcannon is going to be the Word of Crota. This thing, for me, is a solid handcannon. This is exactly what you would expect from a handcannon, in my opinion. A great, recoil direction, very easy to use, great impact to stability ratio and range. Just an all-round solid handcannon. If you're familiar with Fairbringer, this thing is very similar in terms of the way the weapon handles. Although the perks in this thing are not great, it still is a very solid handcannon. Also has void burn, so for those void activities like nightfalls and heroic strikes, it does have a slightly bit more of a competitive edge. Now for me, I'm going to give it a B rating for PvE and PvP. The reason why it's actually getting a B for the PvP as well is because you can actually put explosive rounds on, and it can actually be a little bit more of a workhorse, and you can actually stop it suffering from quite a bit of the damage drop off that every other handcannon seems to be suffering with at the moment. Next handcannon on the list is Fever and Remedy, the Wrath of the Machine handcannon. This thing for me is very situational. Now, reactive reload is a nice perk, but for me, again, it's a very tedious perk to work with. As soon as you get a kill, you pretty much have to reload on the instant after actually getting the kill. Otherwise, reactive reload will not be granted to you for a few seconds. It also, like I said, it only lasts a few seconds, so I mean, the damage buff you're actually getting isn't going to last very long whatsoever. Battle Runner, whilst it's also active, is just sort of like kind of a useless perk in my opinion. I don't really think it sort of works well for a handcannon. So for me, I'm actually going to be giving this a B- for PvE. But it does have solar burn on, so watch out for those solar burn activities for your nightfalls and heroics. And for PvP, I'm going to give it a C. Like I said, reactive reload, it can be a little bit more useful for Crucible to get those 2 taps, but for me, it's a stable handcannon, but for me, the perks just are not too great. Next weapon on the list, what can I say, best till last, the Fatebringer. This thing is by far, in my opinion, the best exotic handcannon in the game for PvE. This thing is an absolute workhorse. Notoriously known again from year 1 of Destiny, people absolutely loved using this thing. Firefly, Outlaw, explosive rounds, you've also got a choice of Field Scout down the middle as well. Personally, I prefer Field Scout because I feel like explosive rounds can, mess around with the Firefly perk every now and then. So for me, I prefer to have the Firefly perk proccing as much as possible. For me, I'm actually going to give this rating a S for PvE. This thing is an absolute workhorse. If you have it, give it a go and you will not be disappointed, trust me. It's an absolute beast. It's also got arc burn on as well, so it gains a competitive edge in arc burn activities like nightfalls and strikes. Also, it deals bonus damage to oracles within the Vault of Glass raid, so again, also a very strong choice for the raid. And for PvP, I'm actually going to be giving it a B. Just all in all, again, it's got explosive rounds on, so you can stop the damage drop off with that. And it's just a very nice handcannon to use in general. Anyway guys, that is pretty much going to do it for the exotic handcannon tier list. Hopefully this gives you a little bit of information as towards how each handcannon performs both in PvE and PvP. Again, this is all based on my opinion. If you disagree with anything I have said in this video, that is completely fine. Do not let my opinion change, whatever you like in Destiny and whatever you find more rewarding to use. That is completely fine. Again, it is just an opinion. But anyway, drop a like on the video if you enjoyed. Subscribe to the channel for future Destiny content. Thank you so much for taking the time out of your day to watch my video. Thank you so much for watching, and peace.